My son punched me in the face after his wife talked to him, but after that the first thing I tasted was iron. It filled my mouth, warm and sharp, and for a moment I thought I'd bitten my tongue. Then I felt the sting blooming across my cheek, the way pain spreads like spilled ink, and I understood what had happened before I even opened my eyes. My own son had hit me. I'm 72 years old. My bones creak when I stand, my hands shake when the weather turns cold, and my heart, well, my heart has carried more years than most people care to imagine. I have been shouted at by foremen, threatened by strangers, and cheated by men in expensive suits. But until that night, no one had ever punched me in the face. Especially not the boy I once held against my chest while he slept. I stood there in my son's living room, the walls decorated with framed photos of his wedding, his promotions, his vacations, none of which included me anymore. The air smelled of coffee and expensive cologne. My daughter-in-law stood behind him, her arms folded, her lips pressed into a thin, satisfied line. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look sorry. She looked victorious. That punch didn't just land on my face. It landed on every memory I had of raising him alone after his mother died. On every night I worked double shifts so he could go to a better school. On every dream I had that one day, when my legs grew weak, he would be my strength. Instead, I tasted blood. But that wasn't the end of my story. That was the beginning. I wasn't always an old man with slow steps and a tired back. Once, I was strong enough to carry a refrigerator up 2 flights of stairs without help. I grew up poor, the kind of poor where hunger becomes a familiar guest and hope feels like a luxury. My father died young, and by 16, I was the man of the house. Life taught me early that if you don't stand up, no one will lift you. When my wife and I finally had our son, I thought the universe was paying me back for all the nights I'd gone to bed with empty pockets. I named him with pride, whispered promises into his tiny ears. I swore I would give him everything I never had. And for a long time, I did. Then cancer took my wife like a thief in the night. One year she was laughing, the next I was standing beside a grave, my son's small hand trembling in mine. I didn't cry that day. I couldn't afford to. Someone had to be strong. So I became both father and mother. I cooked, cleaned, helped with homework, and worked myself to exhaustion. I skipped meals so he could eat. I wore the same shoes until the soles split so he could have new ones. I told myself it was worth it every time I saw him smile. He grew up smart, ambitious, a little proud maybe, but I blamed myself for that. I praised him often, perhaps too often. When he got into university, I sold a small piece of land that had been in my family for generations to pay his fees. I never told him. I didn't want gratitude. I wanted his future. That was my mistake. He met his wife in his final year of university. She was beautiful, sharp-tongued, and carried herself like someone who believed the world owed her something. From the first meeting, I felt invisible in my own home. She corrected the way I spoke, mocked my old clothes, smiled sweetly while her eyes judged everything I did. I told myself I was imagining it. I didn't want to cause trouble. When they married, I gave them what little savings I had left. For your new life, I said. She accepted it without even looking at me. After the wedding, things changed quickly. Phone calls became rare, visits became shorter, excuses became longer. When I tried to advise my son, gently, like a father should, he brushed me off. Times are different now, he'd say. You wouldn't understand. And maybe I didn't, but I knew disrespect when I felt it. Still, I stayed quiet. Until the day my son called me, his voice tight. Come over, we need to talk. I ironed my old shirt, combed my thinning hair, and practiced what I would say. I thought maybe he needed help, maybe money, maybe advice. I was ready to give whatever I had left. I didn't know I was walking into a storm. His wife spoke first. She always did. She accused me of interfering, of being a burden, of emotionally manipulating my son by reminding him of the past. She said I made him feel guilty, that my presence weighed on their marriage. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me. He stared at the floor. I tried to speak calmly. I told her I never meant to interfere, that all I ever wanted was his happiness, that I could step back if that's what they wanted. That's when she leaned close to him and whispered something. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the change. His jaw tightened, his eyes hardened, something dark crossed his face, something I had never seen before. "Why do you always play the victim?" he shouted. "Why can't you just leave us alone?" Before I could answer, his fist came flying. The room spun, pain exploded across my face. I stumbled but didn't fall. Years of hard work had taught me balance, at least. No one spoke. His wife's lips curved upward, just slightly. That was when something inside me finally broke. Not my body. My silence. I didn't shout, I didn't curse. I wiped the blood from my mouth with the back of my hand and straightened my shirt. My son looked shocked, maybe even afraid, not of what he'd done, but of how calm I was. "I raised you better than this," I said quietly, "but I failed to teach you one thing." He scoffed. "What's that?" "How to recognize the hands that fed you." I turned and walked out. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I didn't look back, not when he called my name, not when the door slammed behind me. That night I sat alone in my small rented room and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My cheek was swollen, purple already creeping under the skin. I pressed my fingers against it and felt the ache. I didn't cry. Instead, I made a decision. You see, there was something my son didn't know. Something I never talked about because I didn't believe in boasting. The land I sold for his education, I had only sold part of it. The rest I had quietly invested years ago when a friend convinced me to buy shares in a small construction company. I kept reinvesting dividends, never touching them. Over time, that small investment grew. Not millions, but enough. Enough to live comfortably. Enough to stand on my own. Enough to remind my son that dignity doesn't come from youth or power, but from character. I withdrew my support completely. I changed my phone number. I stopped answering calls from relatives who suddenly wanted to mediate. I focused on myself for the first time in decades. I traveled slowly, yes, but freely. I met old friends. I laughed again. I volunteered at a local school, helping children with reading. They listened to me with respect. They thanked me. I began to heal. Months passed. Then one evening, there was a knock at my door. It was my son. He looked thinner, older, tired in a way no sleepless night can explain. His confidence was gone, replaced by uncertainty. He didn't bring his wife. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. I stepped aside and let him in. He told me everything. The control, the isolation, the way she turned him against friends, against family, against me, how the marriage was crumbling, how debts were piling up, how he felt trapped. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said, his voice breaking. I need my father." I looked at him for a long time. I remembered the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest. I remembered the punch. And I remembered the man I had become after it. "I am your father," I said finally. "That will never change, but respect is not automatic. It must be rebuilt." Tears streamed down his face as he nodded. I didn't rescue him overnight. I didn't hand him money or solve his problems. I gave him something harder and more valuable. Boundaries. I helped him find counseling. I guided him, not controlled him. I made him earn my trust again, slowly, painfully, honestly. As for his wife, she never came back. And me, the old man who once stood bleeding in his son's living room. I stand taller now. Because when my son punched me in the face after his wife talked to him, I didn't fight back with fists. I fought back with self-respect. And in the end, that changed everything.